Doing your homework.
I'm just reading what I wrote. Ha. Ha. Oh.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Here she is again.
Svi, aren't you supposed to be in Iceland or someplace, Norway?
Next week in Hashem.
You're gonna forget how to speak English.
I don't know how to speak English. Or they. Or both.
They don't know. They don't know.
I for sure don't. What kind of background do you have? You're in the
No, it's a picture.
oh,
Yeah. It's a painting.
looks
We
like
like gas stations.
it looks like you're in the mall or something.
That we are where?
In the
No,
mall?
in the office of the oil company.
Yeah. I should be me and Rockefeller.
Mhm. Hello.
Hi,
Ernie.
Ernie.
Good evening, everybody. We'll be back to our regular time, 8 o'clock next week. Okay, we are going to go into chapter 7 a little
No,
bit.
chapter 8.
No,
No, 7.
we finished chapter 7 last week.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm
Chapter,
sorry.
but we basically went through it to understand on the surface what Daniel was dreaming about. This was the dream of the four wild beasts that represent the four Golios: Bavel, Parasumodai, Yavon, and then Edom. But I want to go a little bit more into detail with Meforshim that we didn't do last week. I think it's Kedai. And we will probably begin chapter 8 next week,
Oh, okay.
because there's a lot to say about what we learned last week. But I'll reference, which pasuk I'm reviewing. Pasuk Hey was the pasuk which described the second chaya, which was a bear, which represented Parasu Modai, Persia. And I want to read what the Gra, in his explanation that he brings by Megillas Esther, what he says. He says, Hinei Zohar HaKadosh, Medame Eshtei Bnos Lot, Lishnei HaKochot HaGormim LaAdam Lachto. We know that Lot, right, Avram's nephew, had two daughters. And after Lot was saved from Sodom, Sodom was destroyed. Lot's daughters' husbands did not leave with them. They were under the assumption that the world had been destroyed and they were the only people left on earth. So the two banos of Lot lived with their father and created the nation of Moab and Ammon. Now, we should recognize that David HaMelech, right, the Mashiach, on one side descends from Moab, because Ruth is a princess from Eglon, Melech Moab. So what is he, I guess allegorically, says that the reference to the bonus, the two daughters of Lot, represent two drives that cause man to sin. Koach hamitave v'koach hamitorer. Let's call it the drive for sex, and let's call it the drive for money, greed. Shnei kochot elu hem keneged hanefesh v'haruach. So the human being is made up of a nefesh, a body, v'haruach, and spirit. But these two forces, hem elu amiviim etzel adam, et midata tava umidata chimud. Tava is lust, chimud is lust for money. Koach hamitava lemidata tava, koach hamitorer lemidat bakashata mamon v'chimudo. The Zohar HaKodesh Omer, ki poras umadai hem shnei bnot Lot. The Zohar is telling us that the Persians and the Medes stand also in reference to this, like the two daughters of Lot. Kasher hamila paras hi miloshon prusa. Prusa means a piece. Umlamedet al midata tava. He says this is the lust. She'aleh am rabosenu ein adam meis v'chatzi tavaso biyado. V'alkein hi kemo prusa, davar chatzui. Ki adam margish tamid shlo balach lo sipuk tavaso. When a person has a lust for something, no matter what he does to fill that lust, he always feels like he hasn't achieved it. He's halfway there. Modai is milameret al chemda samamoin. It's greed. Shekain b'modai lo haya kesef nechshav leklum. Like it says in Baba Kama, chayiv lechaver pruta yolechena akrav afilu lamodai. Their money wasn't, everyone was chasing for money night and day. Says the Gra, shte midas ros elu, these two drives cause adam lachto, cause people to sin. Hein midas taiva, and it's not just taiva for sex; it's taiva for anything. Having too much of a taiva for physical pleasures. Vehein mida achemda achar hamomen v'akavod. The midas achemda refers to running after money, or running after glory, or kavod. And each one is oizrois u'misayes achas hashniya kedei la'achtias ha'adam. These two midos, both singularly and working together, are causing man to sin. Kamoshi ira eitzalot ubnosaf shebelayla rishon v'tavo b'chira v'yilu belayla sheni kamat tzirach. Both daughters ended up causing Lot to sin with them, each with a different koach. Now, we are in the midst of Daniel's dreams of these four beasts. Now, if you remember, In Perek Beis or Gimel, we also had a dream of Nebuchadnezzar that Daniel interpreted, which was also referencing the different nations. The question is, what is the difference between Daniel's Chalom and Nebuchadnezzar's Chalom? So, HaChalom Bidvar Adalid Malchil Shimshul Ba'olam Ad Bias Melech HaMashiach, this dream that both of them had about the nations that are going to rule until Mashiach, Nishne v'nichpal b'Sefer Kama Pamim. It's repeated a few times in Sefer Daniel. B'chalomo shel Nebuchadnezzar b'perek Beis, shera'a otam b'dmut chalakim shel hatzelem hagadol b'minei matchot shonim. He had a vision, member of a large statue, made up of different metals, copper and iron. Ha'omdim b'mkomot shonim b'vnei hatzelem. And they were located in different areas of the statue. Ilu Daniel shera'a otam b'dmut chayot. But Daniel saw them as beasts. And Nebuchadnezzar Malchut Bavel Ra'a b'dmut Aryeh. Daniel saw Nebuchadnezzar and Bavel as a lion. Modai u'Poras Ra'a b'dmut Dov. The Persians and the Medes he saw as a bear. Yavan b'dmus Namer, a leopard. Ve'amalchus Arvis lo parish b'posuk musachaya shenim shalba. We weren't even told exactly what kind of beast it was. Now, what's the difference between what Nebuchadnezzar dreamed and Daniel dreamed? Nebuchadnezzar ra'at hakochot hagashmim shel dada malchiot. These were the physical powers of these nations. Hishtalshlutam ba'olam ishtabtam ba'am Yisrael ad sheyavo melech Mashiach v'yabed otam. We have been physically abused by all these nations. Daniel ra'at kochot hatuma ruchanim shehem mishtamshim bahem lachti et ha'olam. Each one of these powers had a different spiritual tuma that was used to corrupt the world and Klal Yisrael. And that's why the dream of Nebuchadnezzar was metal. These are not live things. It's physical only. But in Daniel's dream, these were live animals who have koyach and rotzai. So it reflects the koach haruchanim that these nations brought. So Bavel was nimshal la'aryeh, which is to the Yetzer Hara itself. Because the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Samech Dalet says, Tzuras HaYetzer Hara haisa kegur aryeh. The image of the Yetzer Hara was like a lion. And the Koach HaTuma that was the strongest during Bayis Rishon, all of us who learned Malachim Beis and we saw the descent of Klal Yisrael into Avodah Zarah, was mainly the Yetzer Avodah Zarah that ruined them. And it was mainly the sin of Avodah Zarah that the Beis HaMikdash, the first one, was destroyed. The first Beis HaMikdash was also called an Ariel. That, again, like a lion. Now, Malchus Modai Uporas is Nimshul Ladov, was like a bear. And the Gra says that, explained that the koyach of Persia was taiva and chemda, lust and greed. He says, interestingly, the Gra points out, what was the great sin that Klal Yisrael did that they deserved Haman? Nenu misudaso shel Achashverosh. They had pleasure from the suit of Achashverosh. Taiva sachila, taiva sashtia. And then they brought women out. Remember, Vashti was brought out. So every taiva was filled. It's not coincident that we see that the nisayon that is being put on Klal Yisrael during the time of the Persians is in this type of Yetzer Hara. Malchus Yavon is Nimshal Namer, is a leopard. Why? Rashi over there brings V'nikra Namer al Shem Shahaisa Goizeres Gzeres al Yisrael Minamuros Umushuno Zumizu. A leopard has spots, and the Gzeres were varied and different. The Greeks also had a koach hatuma ruchani. It was azus, and that's why we say Abi az kenomer, be fierce like a leopard. Yavan in Bereshis, when it says v'choyshech al pnei tehom zu Yavan, shechshicha eineim v'libam shel Yisrael. Hellenism, it was to beautify the body, and many of the Jews at the time of Hanukkah had been captured by Hellenism. If it wasn't for the Chashmonoim that were moister nefesh to be mitaras. Finally, this last beast, the Revius, which is Edom, has koach hashchasa, destruction. The Romans destroyed everything in their path. And maybe we can say that it's connected to this. What was the cause, the root cause for Bayis Sheni to be destroyed? We've said sinas chinam. As it says in the Gemara, V'migdash Sheni, shayu oiskim b'tor v'mitzvos u'gmilas chasodim, b'nei ma'ikarav, why was it destroyed? B'nei shaisa bo sinas chinam. V'adayin asodim katrech b'tochenu. We still have this problem within us. And therefore, we still don't have Melech HaMashiach. How did Klal Yisrael survive both the physical destruction and the ruchani destruction of these four great empires? Says the Mishra Zazav, Hatzalatam shel Yisrael miklipot umitumas arbes malchios hayu b'schus shloisha ha'avos Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov v'David HaMelech sheb'schusha shel Avram Avinu nitzulu mitumas malchus Bavel. And we know the person who fought idol worship the most was Avram Avinu. Nimrod wanted him to bow down to an idol. He had himself thrown into the furnace. A story that we learned earlier in the Sefer Daniel. So Avram and Hanan Mishael Vazarya saved us from Malchus Bavel. From Modai Uporas, which we've said is lust and greed, is because of Yitzchak Avinu. Shemosar Esnafshur Lakeda, he was willing his whole goof, even though the bodily goof has tivus. He was willing to give it all up. Umituch tumas chochmas yavon, shenikras choshech, ha'atzala hayta yedei Torah, shehi or, Torah or. That's kochosh liYaakov Avinu. Titein emes liYaakov. He's the Yoshev Ohalim. The kocho avar l'shevet Levi, shaya meiser mibonav asiri yekodesh. And it says, Yoru mishpatech liYaakov v'tortzcha Yisrael. Ze koach haKohanim haChashmonoim, who beat the Yevonim. Ve'atzala mimalchut Edom. Shekocha hi akas v'aretzicha. We said Edom represents anger, murder, hashchasa. Is going to be the b'schus David HaMelech. Even though David was also an Admoini, he was a Reuter. When Shmuel Hanavi was sent to anoint David HaMelech, he was also initially alarmed because David looked like a person of violence, like Esav. Ela shehu tikein et koach hakas. David HaMelech worked on himself, and he primarily defeated the koach hakas. Av klape oivav sheratfu also. And the people who ran after him, like Shaul HaMelech, Shaya mutul laharogotam. He was permitted to kill them. Somebody's chasing you to kill you. You're allowed to hashkem lahav, habal lahargo hashkem laharcha. The David mona sarigason. He held himself back, and this is keneged kol asinas chinam. He told him mikoach hashchasa shebe'edom. The avas chinam comes. He didn't need to love Shaul HaMelech, but he did. So Haile David bechinas avas gedoylav, afilu l'soinav, even to his enemies. Any comments?
Our nisyonot is much less than the goyim nisyonot because of has the overs, because of the going after the overs.
See, I didn't hear what you said in the beginning.
We have much less nisyonot than all the rest of the world because of the schus of avos. So how fair is it?
We have schusavois, which have taught us the methodology of how to overcome the problems that have beset us. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's ingrained in us, and by the goyim they don't have this, so it's not kind of not fair.
Right, but what other nation has been persecuted for the 2,000 years? No, any other nation would have fallen by the wayside. There is no other nation. We exist. The immortality and the eternity of the Jewish people is exactly like you say, is because we have the DNA, the physical DNA and the spiritual DNA to keep us strong. It's exactly correct. A few other comments. The Medrash Lekach Tov, even though the Pasuk did not describe for us what type of animal the fourth animal is, they bring a Medrash from Bereshis, Shelachai Revius Hayadmus Chazir. It was a pig. Ulefisha Hayameshukatz lo Zachar Shma Daniel. Daniel didn't want to mention such an ugly animal. V'hu malchus Edom shenimshla kechazir. Lama nimshla malchus Edom lechazir. Why is the pig the animal that Edom is compared to? Elama chazir mifaset lapav b'shashu roivets. So we know, and chazir is the only animal that has a split hoof but doesn't chew its cud. That's why it's not kosher. He says, Ru'u, shehu tahor. Now, who took over from the Roman Empire? It was the Christian Empire. In the year 300 CE, Constantine the emperor, he had a dream of a cross of gold before one of his victories, and because of that, he and the Roman Empire converted to Christianity. And all of the various cities which had a Roman embassy, those became the bishops in all the great cities. The bishop in Paris, the bishop in Hungary, was all a remnant of the Roman Empire. Now, the Christians, they thought that they were the new Jews. It was replacement theory. That's why they believe in the Old Testament. But then there's a New Testament and God rejected the Jewish people, and we're the new Jews. And that's the concept that the chazir shows his hoofs. You see, I'm kosher. But inside, they're not kosher. And that's the image of one of the reasons why this beast has the image of a pig. Now, we had a debate which we mentioned briefly last week, the vast majority of the Meforshim say that this fourth beast represents Rome. Rashi, the Rambam, the Ramban, the Rambam, they all hold that the fourth beast is Rome. However, you should know the Even Ezra and the Mitsudos say that the Chaya Revius is Malchus Yishmael. She'afu Timoshech ad Malchus Melech HaMashiach. He says the Even Ezra says that Rome really emerges out of Yavon, because it says Vitzim miyad Kitim and Uvnei Yavon Elisha v'Tarshish Kitim v'Dodanim. So Rome and Yavon are one thing according to Even Ezra. And of course we know that in Rome, all Roman law was developed from the Greeks. Every Roman house had taught their children Greek, and they in Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and everything. This was the knowledge. So Rome was sort of like according to Even Ezra, was a continuation of the Malchus of Yavon, which was the third. And the fourth is Yishmael. That's how the Even Ezra learns. However, the Ramban definitely disagrees. And however, all the people who disagree, the question is, why then is not Yishmael listed separately as a Malchus? I mean, in the year 600, the Prophet Muhammad comes out of Arabia, and they conquer a third of the world, all of North Africa, all of the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantine. I mean, phenomenally successful. So says the Ramban, Hine arba malchiot shechoshev hakosov lo mono behen rak hagover zu al zu v'tofeses machus kolachas mechaverta. He says it only lists those empires that conquered one another. So there was Bavel, then Porus Umadai came and took over the same empire of Bavel. And then the Greeks under Alexander the Great took over the same land, and so did the Romans. But the Arabs didn't take over the same empire. Not only that, the four that conquered each other, Kol achas mehen moshelas al Yisrael. And the Jews were mishabed under their malchus. So kasher atzalu kim, I'm reading the Ramban. Kasher atzalu kim larot Daniel galut amo, amar lo dala, dalacha ki nishtabed ben malchus hakazdim, v'achrem bimkom mishutu ben aparsiyim. Then will be the Persians, v'achrem itfutsu machuta malchus Yevanim, then the Greeks. V'gam hei moshlim bimach, they will rule you. V'achar ken yigarvu alem aromiim. V'heim yishtabdu b'Yisrael ad 8 kates. Ki lo tichrat malchutam rak ayedei hamashiach hagoel. Those are the words of the Ramban. Aval, says the Ramban, im hayu bo olam malchiot acherot b'mei malchiot ha'elef. There were other kingdoms during these periods of time. Eina katuv moneotam. V'lo heratzu ratam. They were not shown to Daniel. Ki en lo tzarech lirotam l'diat meshach hagalut. V'yadua, I'm still in the Ramban. Ki roimi higlatenu b'mei Titus v'Aspianus. Vespasian and Titus were the Roman generals that took us into Galus. Lo Yishmaelim. Lachein b'chol makom sha'anu begalut Romi anachnu. The Ramban who lived in Barcelona in the year 1300, he's still speaking. He says we're living in the Roman exile. Ki od lo hita'arnu arayom. We have not been purified from this until day. He says v'yadu midivrei rabotenu gam misifrei aromiim, like from Josephus, ki ashlish asher Alexander al Roimi nilcham im hamelech b'Mogdonia eretz Yavon. Achrei mot Alexander Moshel bakol the gavralav kodem churban habayit. Rome conquered a significant part of the empire of Alexander the Great. And then the Greeks were underneath the Romans. And it's at that time that Gavra Roimim al Yisrael, Ad Shechrivu Abayis HaKadosh. Says the Chazon HaGeula, the Ramban wrote a sefer called Sefer HaGeula. And in a commentary there, he also says, L'chura kasha, shematzinu b'divrei Chazal sheyesh lon sarot mi-Yishmael. We have a lot of sorrows from Yishmael. Why isn't this mentioned? Aval kvar bi'er Rav Chaim Vital. Rav Chaim Vital was the prime student of the Ari HaKadosh. We just had his yard site a few weeks ago. Says Rav Chaim Vital, Sha'arba Galios Hein Bavel Moda Yovan ve'Edom Ve'hein Meshulot El Chayot Kamosh Nizkar b'Sefer Daniel. Says Rav Chaim Vital, Aval Yesh Od Chamishi Galut Yishmael. Everyone, listen very carefully to what Rav Chaim Vital is about to say. V'Yishmael, Kevan Shehu Ben Avraham v'Nimo. Yishmael is the son of Avram, and he's circumcised. Therefore, Eino Nimshal Chaya. You can't compare him to a beast. Elanikra Pere Adam. He was called a wild man. Lo Adam Gomor, Mimnei Shemal V'lo Pora. We Jews, we cut the foreskin and we pull it back. It's called Priya. The Goyim don't. They just mal without Priya. Says, and that's how Rav Chaim Vital says he's called a Pera Adam. And he quotes Arei Mevuar K'divrei Ramban, She'ein Yishmael Michlal Adad Malchios. So he agrees with the Ramban that they're not part of the Daled. Ve'ein Golus Zod, our Golus is not Nikrit al Shmo, Ela Nikrit Golus Edom. Onam Vade Sheyesh Gam Golus Yishmael Gam Kein. He says, we have trouble from them. He says, Rav Chaim Vital wrote in the year 1530, 1540. So he wrote over 500 years ago. Atidin lehitzar Yisrael tzoros koshos umeshunos. They are going to oppress the Jewish people greatly. Says the Mishbetz Ozov. Now, I just want to get everybody historically so we're all discussing on the same page. The Jews living under Arab dominion had a pretty benign existence. The Jews in Morocco, the Jews in Baghdad, the Jews in North Africa, they were dhimmi. They were second-class citizens. They had to walk on the other side. But there were no pogroms like there was in Christian Europe. There wasn't Gzeres Tach V'Tat like in 1648 when hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed by the Cossacks. Forget about the Crusades where there were thousands of Jews killed. In the time of Khmelnytsky, there were tens of thousands of Jews killed. My point is, up until 1948, the Jews had a relatively benign existence in the Arab lands, and they continued to live there. It's only since political Zionism that we've had significant trouble with the Arabs. Wars, killing, and much worse over at the last 50, 60, 70 years show us. So Rav Chaim Vital, when he's predicting Tzoros Koshos Meshunos, he's predicting something that really didn't occur until recently. Says Rav Chaim Vital when this shaila that he's asked, that even though Yishmael is giving us a lot of tzoros, it's not counted. Why? It's not that all the Jewish people were living under Yishmael's thumb. We were scattered all over the place. We were in Europe, we were other places, right? But, Bavel, Yavan, Madai, the Jewish people lived in Palestine. And those empires oppressed all of the Jewish people. You can't say that about Malchus Yishmael. This is something from Kushelevsky, who used to come to Los Angeles, and he brings from a medrash regarding Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Elu ein anistarot sheniglu leRav Shimon ben Yochai kishayam ischaber mipnei Kesar melech Edom. Why was Rav Shimon ben Yochai and his son hiding in the cave? Because they were being chased by the Romans. Omad b'tfila arbaim yom v'layla. Miyad niglu sisrei haketz ustumos. The secrets of the end of the exile was revealed to him. And he read the pasuk in Parshas Balak. Vayaris hakeni, vayisam shalo vayomar. Kiven shira'a malchus Yishmael, shahaya ba hiskil omer lo dayenu mashenesto no malchus harasha. Why wasn't it bad enough what we were subjected to by Rome? Om Rav Shimon kach neneli alti rabni shena kodesh baruch hu ati lotziat Yisrael ela shegalui v'yadu lefanav b'lachat sheYisrael chatzim bo hakodesh baruch hu motzi malchus Yishmael aleihem kedei lo shia miyad malchus harasha. He says that the Arabs have been brought to us in some ways to save us from the Romans, from perhaps what he's referring to as Christendom. V'hu mamid aleim novi shoytev isha ruach. He's talking about Muhammad. V'hu mechabesh lifnei Masratz. He conquers the ground. They will fight the Bnei Esav. And we know that the Ottoman Empire made it all the way to the gates of Vienna. So they bring a very interesting medrash that in some ways the Arab conquering their lands were meant to ease the suffering of the Jewish people under Christian Europe. Just an interesting thing that I found. And that, based on that, that Yishmael didn't have a rise to cause problems for us. V'adarabba, HaKadosh Baruch Hu hotzio ota kadei she'tirachech gzerot Edom al Yisrael, to make it easier for us. V'ayedei she'tiyana milchamot b'neihem yarivu b'neihem. They'll have their own fights. Yanichu Yisrael, and they'll leave the Jewish people alone. But, says the contemporary Mishbitz Zav, Mistama, the fact that we have currently tsaros with Yishmaelim, Shat tsaros she'yishmael mitzrim Yisrael nigromim liYisrael b'glal chatateim, she'az nimtzrim gam b'yad Yishmael sovim. If the Jewish people are not acting in the proper way, they will be nimsar liYishmael as well. Says the Maharal, in the year 1200, 1300. You see what we're doing here. We are mining the great machshava thinkers, what they thought about this nevuah of Daniel. But we're looking back in retrospect, 600 years, 700 years, 800 years, the kind of things that they're saying and the kind of things we have seen played out. Says the Maharal, Yesh bnei Adam shoalim, and this is in Sefer Ner Mitzvah. Yesh bnei Adam shoalim ve'echan ramaz malchut Yishmael shehi malchut rafta v'takifa. Where is the hint in this dream of Daniel to this very strong Arabic Empire, Utshuva. Mashalo Zachar Malchut Yishmael, Ki lo yichashev ha'katuv rak ha'malchut shekiblu malchot kadishin aleihen. These empires, in a sense, inherited certain strengths of the Jewish people when they conquered us. Sheyarshu Malchus Yisrael v'kocha. These were the Dal Malchios. V'imlo shebitel Malchus Yisrael lo higia lehem ha'malchus. If it wasn't for the setting of the Jewish sun, these kingdoms would not have arisen. Aval Malchut Yishmael lo yarash kochom in Malchut Yisrael. Here's what he says, the Maral. Malchut Yishmael did not get their power from Malchus Yisrael. Kocho v'tokvo natan lo Hashem yitbarach b'fnei atzmo b'shvil shaya mizera Avraham. The power of the Arabic Empire is given to them by HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself because he was the son of Avram. Like it says, Ul Yishmael Shmaticha. Says the Maral, Hinei Natan Hashem Yitbarach Koch V'Tokef L'Yishmael B'fnei Atzmo. Umizei Medaber Kasher Mazker Elu Dal Malchios. Because those Malchios got their power when they conquered Klal Yisrael. So some say that the Sefer Daniel Yisrael says that the whole root of Golus Edom started by the Cheta Egel. Lech reid ki shiche samcha. Like we said, the whole power of Rome is hashchasa. So it started from the Egel. It says, Beis chalokim b'cheta Egel. Umagbilot legalut Adam, that led to Golus Edom. Beredis Moshe min ha'arush de'eluchos biyado. When Moshe comes down, v'halachim Yoshua likras ha'machane, Omer lo Yoshua, kol milchama b'machaneh. Says Moshe, lo kol anot gvura, lo kol anot chalusha, kol anot anochi shomeya. What does the Gra say? Ein kan avera pratit shel mitzvah saseh mesuyem she'ovim lebekum baseh. There's no avera that they're doing here. There's no law that they're violating. It's bittul Torah, uprikas ol malchus shamayim. They're not learning Torah, and we have no Hashem on top of us. And this prikas ol Torah, malchus shamayim, that would lead directly to the Roman exile. And the Cheta Egel is murkav of these two chatoim. The Abarbanel lived 1492, was still alive. He had an audience with Isabella, Ferdinand and Isabella. Susie and I were in the Alhambra Palace. You can stand in the room where they had an audience with him. The Abarbanel exiled to Venice and helped. He was a financier in Spain, and he was used in Venice. Says the Abarbanel, Kvar yadata sha'achrei heyot Romi medina chalfu alea shlosha minei hanagut. The Abarbanel is a student of history. He knows that Rome started off as with kings. And then in the year about 500 BC, right, BCE, Achrei sheparku haromi'im alehem olam malachim, husam hanaga kolelet echad v'sholosh me'esh yoatzim. They had a senate that were chosen in Rome by vote. They ruled for 465 years until Julius Caesar, right? Julius Caesar became a dictator, 44 BCE. So the Abarbanel gives us the history. Then Nasu Baroimi Kesarim. That's when they had Caesars. So it's just interesting that the Abarbanel goes through the three periods of Roman history. Now, in Pasuk Ches, we talked about a Karen, a big horn and a small horn that grew out of the fourth beast. So the Malbim says, and most of the Meforshim say that the horn refers to the fact that that Christianity came out of the Roman Empire. Some say it's Romez al Muhammad. That again, these are the little empires that are growing out of the Roman Empire, whether it's Christian Europe or whether it's the Arab Empire. Hinei ha'inyan hazeh shenichnesah v'chadra emuna notzrit, that the Christian religion or Islam l'toch ha'malchiot, and they became part of these political entities, and they fought against Am Yisrael. Now, Afal Pishmei Azum Olam Esav Son Eli Yaakov. Esav hated Yaakov from the beginning. Vayisritzu Abanim B'Kirba. They fought even in the womb. Uvishar Sha'am Yisrael Kibel Sator Mar Sina Yarda Sina LaOlam. V'chol ha'umas notlu chelik mina. Anti-Semitism began at Sinai. Uv'chol zot, says the Mishpat Zozov B'li Sofek, Shi Tavota Datot Anal, Christianity and Islam, Shebo Kivyochol La'achlif Tam Yisrael, that both of those religions are like replacement of the Jewish people. The anti-Semitism became even stronger. And the destruction, the pogroms, and leading up to the eventual Shoah. So that's why these chronos are included in the fourth beast. Yeah, this will save for next week when we start Parakeh.
Can I ask you something? So,
Was this, by the way, wasn't this very interesting tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
By the way, what pasuk did we finish on?
No, we finished the whole parak.
Correct.
We finished the parak last week. I just went back more in detail, to some of these concepts. I think I shared most of them. We may share some of them at the beginning of Parak Ches, because remember, at the end of this parak, Daniel wants to reveal the end, but it's held back from it, just like it was held back from Yaakov. Daniel does not reveal us the Kates. Okay, so there is a discussion of we'll have a little bit of a discussion of what does it mean, Bias HaMashiach versus Gogu Magog, and the final judgment. We'll discuss some of them, Meforshim, how Daniel lays that out. So we all have a picture of how the later Meforshim see that. I think there's an accepted view, which we'll touch on as an introduction to next week. But next week, God willing, we'll learn Parak Chet, which is another dream of Daniel. But now we're going to revert to Hebrew. We leave Aramaic and we go to Hebrew. We'll have to see why. So Daniel is, as you can see, a very interesting sefer. Most of us have not learned it before. So I think it's a good thing to go through this more in depth. This is a very, very famous chapter in Daniel the chapter of the four chayos and his prediction of the various malchus. Remember, it's easy for us looking back. We know the history, but people who learned Sefer Daniel did not know that all these things were going to happen.
Mhm.
Okay.
Wait, I was asking you.
Esty, what did you want to? Esty, what did you want?
So you implying that because, I mean, you're saying or whatever, because Ishmael is the son of Abraham. So I think in other words, their empire, however you want to term that, is going to be the strongest because he's circumcised. I don't know.
No, I didn't say the strongest. The Maral
But
said
the morale.
said that they're different than the other four Malchios because he's a son of Avram. They didn't inherit their koach from us. They were given koach independently by God. That's what
But he was thrown out. He was a bad seed. So it's just interesting.
he was a bad seed. We're certainly favored over
Right.
Ishmael. By the way, actually, I've heard the same. By the way, let me tell you, in a similar way, because we learned today, before we read the Maral, we read that shtickle where Ishmael was placed here actually to make it easier for us with the Romans, because the Ottoman Empire battled the Roman Empire. Okay. I've also heard it said that it's not a coincidence that therefore what is on the Harabayis today, it's an Islamic place of worship.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's not happenstance. That means the place has become has remained. There was a certain sanctification that remained there. There's no mall there. Nobody, you understand? You're talking about that mosque was built in the year 700 or 750. It's a very old mosque. So for the last 1,500 years, it's remained a place of prayer. It's not our prayer house, but it is a house of prayer. Eventually, Bayis Shlishi will be built there, which will be our bias. But based on this Maral and based on what we learned a little bit tonight, that this is part of maybe a HaKadosh Baruch Hu's plan in some way.
Obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, but also when he says about Peri Adam, that's what Onkelos said. Yeah, the Peri Adam, Yad Bakol Yad Kol Bo. So that basically the Arabs have their hands in everything. So all the oil.
Right, they're Ganovim.
No, it's got to do with Yad Bakol Yad Kol Bo, because the whole world became sustained by the Arab oil. That's Yad Bakol Yad Kol Bo.
Sorry.
Okay, very good. So everybody should have a good week. Let's remind everybody, we have a scholar in residence this week at Yavna and in Israel Hancock Park at Shar Tefillah.
Shabbos.
I'm sure everybody will get flyers if they haven't gotten it already.
Okay.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, night.
Good week, everybody.
Night. Good night.